Hello and welcome. We are going to talk a bit about the essential biodiversity variables and show how they can facilitate international cooperation and harmonization for biodiversity monitoring. So, as you all know, biodiversity monitoring is carried out throughout a huge range of programs because of the diversity of the different monitoring objectives and targets, for example, the different species that are monitored. The programs are also very diverse in terms of scale and range covered. And of course, there is a vast array of different techniques, methods, and field protocols that are used. Now, on top of that, there is a variety of contexts, such as historical and cultural differences. We can see that, for example, that the presence of a volunteer community for monitoring is not always a given in every country. The monitoring programs depend also on the means available, both human and economic means, and the type of institutions carrying them out, whether it's NGOs, universities, government institutions. And of course, there is also the diversity in biogeographical contexts that play a major role in monitoring. So we can ask ourselves within this diversity of contexts, how could we monitor biodiversity across scales in a harmonized way so that we can see the wider picture? And this is a question that we've been working on at Biodiversa Plus, the European Biodiversity Partnership. And one of Biodiversa Plus's objectives is to promote and support transnational biodiversity monitoring. And within this framework, we are studying the possible strategies for an optimal harmonization of monitoring protocols, methods, and databases. And today we're going to focus on the harmonization of protocols. And for this, our first step was to analyze what is already being done in terms of transnational monitoring, and most importantly, to try to understand how. So we carried out a literature survey on transnational biodiversity monitoring programs, and we can tell you that there is a great number of them. And we chose 15 case studies to really focus more in detail and to see the program's objective, its governance, so to see how it's organized and who is involved mainly, the type of protocol that is employed, the geographical scale at which the biodiversity information is collected and aggregated, whether it's local, national, or regional, and then the form in which the information is transferred for decision making, whether it's transferred as raw data, EBVs, or indicators. And well, it's no surprise, the results showed that there are different strategies that are used in the different monitoring programs. And it seems that the strategies depend on two main components. So firstly, there is the flexibility of the protocol, as some programs opt for a strict protocol that is carried out equally throughout the entire territory that is covered by the program. Then on the other extreme, there are programs that rely on results coming from different protocols. And in between, there are programs where there is one general protocol that is applied in a flexible way. This way, it is more adapted to local conditions, mainly. Now, the other main component is the data aggregation and transfer in the information chain. So the first possibility is to collect data locally and then directly analyze it at the transnational scale in order to produce the general indicators. Then there is another approach where the data is collected and treated locally to produce EBVs, for example. And then it is at a transnational level where the different EBVs produced at the local scales are aggregated to produce the general indicators. And finally, there is a parallel approach that seems to be promising, where there's both the raw data and EBVs that are transferred to this transnational scale. And this approach is being tested by some pilot projects, so we'll hear more about that in the future. Now, when we look at both of these components together, on one side, we have the protocol flexibility gradient that you see up there. And on the other, the scale of data aggregation and processing. So different combinations are possible. And from our literature survey and analysis, there are three main combinations or strategies that appear to be used the most by transnational monitoring programs. And of course, each of these have their pros and cons. So on one side, on the top left, well, there are programs applying one strict protocol and gathering the raw data from for a joint analysis at the transnational scale directly. And this way, the results are easy to compare, and the implementation of the monitoring protocol seems to be quite easy as it's a straightforward, strictly defined protocol. But the strategy is inflexible to adapt to local priorities, which might not always align with the defined protocols or what is wanted from these monitoring efforts. And because of this distance to the local priorities and involvement, this might lead to a lack of motivation of local stakeholders. Now, if we look at the other extremes, or at the bottom right, there is a strategy based on the use of EBVs, which are produced locally, for example, at the national level. Each country would apply the protocol of their choice in order to produce the defined EBV, or the EBV that is asked for this monitoring. And then the EBVs that are produced in different countries are assembled to have a transnational overview. Some of the main benefits of this strategy are that by using the existing protocols, previous work and knowledge can be leveraged, and the old data sets aren't lost. And as well, redundancy in monitoring efforts can be avoided. Also, local initiatives are reinforced and integrated into this wider community, which can boost motivation and the sense of ownership. Nevertheless, there are also challenges related to the need for this higher scale coordination. And the fact of defining and agreeing on the EBV metrics to follow would require significant effort as well. Finally, here in the middle, there is an intermediate point combining both strategies by using the country-specific variation of a common protocol and the parallel data flow in the information chain. Here, the use of local knowledge and validation in this approach satisfies both local and global requirements. And this flexible approach offers different options that can match the different levels of expertise available locally also. And it facilitates the integration of new tech into the data collection and analysis, as they can be added as possible options of techniques used in a given protocol. Now, on the downside, the strategy can be costly and time-consuming because you have to handle both raw data sets and EBVs. Now, our main outcomes and recommendations based on the analysis would be that regarding the protocol's flexibility, it really depends on the situation and the starting point, whether there is an already good monitoring coverage by ongoing programs or not, or if you have to start from zero. And now regarding the data workflow, it would seem beneficial to maintain a parallel approach where both raw data and EBVs are analyzed at the transnational scale. Now, to focus on one of our recommendations, that would be having a parallel transfer of data where both EBVs and raw data are shared to the transnational scale for the analysis. We will explain here a bit more in detail the added value of using EBVs here. So the EBVs, to recap a bit, are produced at the local level. We can imagine, for example, each country is in charge of collecting and treating the data via the protocol of their choice, and then they provide the standardized outcome in the form of EBVs to a structure that is operating at an upper scale and that assembles all of these EBVs produced in different countries in order to have this transnational view. Here, EBVs facilitate the comparability and interoperability of monitoring products, and they allow for a common language. All of this while leaving the current practices on the ground as they are. So let's say the field protocols can be left untouched. And there is also a sense of subsidiarity and the prevention of possible conflict among stakeholders, because all of these stakeholders will be aligned into a network. So there is more dialogue and more cooperation between people as well. And now, why do we talk about monitoring communities? This is related to the fact that depending on the monitoring community, let's say the bat monitoring community or the marine biodiversity monitoring community, or there's any number of communities. So depending on the monitoring community, the EBVs that are relevant to follow might be different. So there needs to be an agreement within each community on which EBVs can be produced and aggregated to have this transnational picture. Now, following this idea, there are many governance implications for the functioning of such a system. And we would like to propose a common framework where the results from different biodiversity monitoring communities can be integrated effectively. So here we can imagine, for example, different biodiversity monitoring communities. Here, 3 examples. We have the soil biodiversity community here in green, the bird community in dark blue, and the freshwater ecosystems in light blue. There could be a long-term community node ensuring the general coherence, coordination, and facilitation among the different stakeholders involved within each monitoring community. And as well, there could be a technical expert group, which will work more precisely on defining the EBV values for this community and the possible protocols designs and the statistical analysis for it. And now to ensure the general coherence between the different communities and the EBVs and monitoring programs that are produced by each community, we can imagine the expert groups of each community being linked to an intercommunity technical expert group. And this expert group would be part of a wider hub, so at a larger scale that is linking the biodiversity monitoring communities. We could imagine this as a regional biodiversity monitoring coordination center, for example. So now all of these results, recommendations, and this proposed framework are presented and explained more in detail in a guide that is being published by Biodiversa Plus, and that will be available at the end of the month. So you're all very welcome to check out this guide, and even more welcome to contact us if you would like to comment on it or further discuss, or if there are questions, and we would be very happy to exchange with you a bit. So I hope this was all clear and that it somehow convinced you of the usefulness of EBVs for the harmonization of monitoring efforts. And now there's Guillaume there with you on place who could answer some questions if you might have any or comment further. So thank you very much.